Two wheels to wear. The longest journey starts with a single step, or in some cases, the single turn of a pedal. Who remembers the joy, the sheer exhilaration we experienced as children when we jumped on our Malvern-style bicycle, disappeared for the day, adventuring, exploring, playing, getting into mischief, crashing, no helmet, no water bottle, definitely no mobile phone. Nobody knew where we were, nobody cared, because it was fun, and it was safe, and it was necessary. Then we grow up, and we put our bicycle and our free spirit back in the garage. Mortgages, work, responsibility suck the joy out of everyday living. I put my bicycle back in the garage when I was around about 24. Baby 2 had come along, and I just couldn't fit all three of us on the bicycle anymore. I'm going to fast track now from 24 to when I find myself at the age of 41, which isn't now. 41, I'm single again. I'm going to ignore the 3 children. Not ignore them, but, they're not here now. Divorce, studying theatre and dance, running a small theatre company, and a few mental health issues along the way. They're all topics for another talk. So at the age of 41, I'm single again. And yes, I'm on a dating site. And I meet a gentleman, and he's actually really lovely. And we hit it off. And he's younger than me, so that's kind of exciting. And he rides a bike everywhere, all the time. Not in Lycra, not to race, just to get places. He rides to the grocery store. He rides to work. He rides to meet me on our first date. So I'm thinking, if I want to continue seeing this man, the bike's coming back out of the garage. So I ended up having to borrow a mountain bike because my bike was no longer useful. And the mountain bike was way too big for me. But I, first time, got back on the seat, 2 kilometres to the local supermarket, 2 kilometres back on a very flat bicycle path. Should have been easy. I was exhausted. My legs were aching. I was totally shattered, and I could not believe how unfit I had become since I last got off my bike. But I thought, I'm not going to let this beat me. So I started riding to work every day, and that was around about a 7K trip into Brisbane, inner city Brisbane traffic. It's not fun. And back home again. And then I also started exploring the beautiful bike paths that Brisbane has to offer, and they are magnificent. And so cycling along creeks, cycling through gardens, and that was really, really lovely. Now I noticed some significant changes. The first was obvious. My fitness had improved rapidly. Not just my fitness, but my mental health had improved. I was less stressed, I was less anxious, I was less uptight, and life was becoming fun again. I was experiencing that sense of adventure that I'd lost. So from 2 kilometres of agony to now riding, say, 30 Ks and enjoying it. A couple of things happened along the journey that really encouraged my riding. Now, the first one was one Christmas, and I was given the most beautiful bike for a present. This is her here. She goes everywhere I go. She came here with me today. It wasn't bought from a store. It was hand-built from old bits of bicycle and new bits, and it was built with love by a very dear friend of mine, and I treasured it. I also am a little bit of a show-off, so I wanted to show this bike off to anyone and everyone who cared to see it. So I began riding everywhere, not in Lycra, but in silly spotted dresses, and often with matching accessories, and I enjoyed that. One day, I had the day off work, and I got up and I've got to do the housework and pay the bills and all of those things. And it's like, no, I don't. So I got my bike out, backpack, and off we went. I had no idea where I was going to go. I just started riding. And riding along the bike paths that I often rode along, and I got to the point where I'd normally stop, which was about 25, 30 Ks from home, a place called Nudgee Beach, had some little picnic, and I thought, it's only early, I can keep riding. So I did. And riding along the waterfront, all the way out to Scarborough. Sat down, had a coffee, and realised I'd just ridden 50 Ks away from home. Now, that was great. There was a problem. There's another 50 Ks back home. So I pedalled back home. And when I got home, that was a 100K bike ride, and I was flabbergasted. But I wasn't exhausted. I'd actually managed it. I was a bit sore, but I wasn't, rolling on the floor. And that really broke a barrier down for me. I was fit now, and it opened up my mind to what are the possibilities. Where can I ride to? So that's my bike riding attire. I think the Lycra is good if you're going to do the Tour de France, but I have no ambitions there whatsoever. So then another Christmas and another bike. But this time it is a mountain bike, and it's in my size. It's very compact. It came from a 14-year-old boy. And we spent Christmas morning exploring paddocks and pony trails and 40-odd Ks off-road there I am on road, but the rest of it was off road, and didn't see a car, didn't see a house, didn't see any concrete. There was just cows and kangaroos, and it was so peaceful and it was so relaxing. It also opened up a whole new world of cycling that I'd been missing, the world of off-road. And it was peaceful and it was relaxing and it was wonderful. So I started putting these three things together. I'm quite fit now. I can ride quite long distances if I choose to, and I can ride off-road. So what I want to talk to you about is some of the adventures I've had. One was riding here today to do a TEDx talk, and some of the lessons I've learnt along the way with my cycling. So when I hit about the age of 47, I decided it was midlife crisis time and I needed to do something I'd never done before. So I entered myself in a triathlon. And I loved riding, and I knew I was fit when it came to cycling, and I thought, I'll be fine, just going to swim and run. I was terrible. The swimming I still don't like, and I have never done another triathlon since. The running was fun, and I enjoyed it. But I entered the triathlon. I came a respectable 10th in my age group, and I did compete on my pink bike. Why not? Okay, so then I still do have, 2 adult children, and they were living in Byron Bay at the time. And I rang one of my daughters on a Thursday night and said, I'm going to pop down on the weekend, sweetheart, I'll see you. Okay, Mum, that'll be great. So the Friday morning I get up and I pack my backpack and I get my bike, and I cheated a little bit and we got the train as far as Robina, me and my bike that is, and I decided I would ride the rest of the way. So I rode all down along the east coast, down into Byron. So not along the highway for anyone that knows the route down there, but along the beautiful beaches. And so you've got here, sand, east coast of Australia, and it's magnificent. I ended up running a little bit late getting in that night because it was also a really good pub. And I stopped and had some lunch, a couple of glasses of wine and chats with the locals. I also had a really great moment when I was coming through the really hilly back roads of Byron Bay, and a friend of mine from Brisbane drove past in his ute, and he looked at me and he just kept riding. I'm like, fine. Anyway, that night I got a phone call and he said, did I actually see you today riding your bike through the back streets of Byron? And I went, yeah, that was me. He said, I thought it was. And I thought, no, that's just crazy. I said, yeah, that was me. That night I pulled into the driveway and there's my daughter playing music with her friends as you do in Byron Bay. And she just stopped and she looked at me, she looked at the bike and she said, Mum, you didn't. I went, yeah, I just rode here. And that night she took me out for a drink. I needed it. Next day I recovered. And then on the Sunday I turned around and pedalled back to Brisbane. I was exhausted. There would be a lie to say I wasn't. It was agonising. By the time I got back, my legs were shaking. I'd broken 3 spokes on the bicycle as well. So the last part had to be pushed. But I did it. And it got me thinking that you don't need a car or a bus or a plane to travel. You can just get on your bike and travel. Opened up a whole new thought process. I had been planning to go to Europe. My children were all grown up and I had not been overseas. I'd once been overseas and I wanted to go again. And so I couldn't afford the beautiful holiday that my mother paid for me last time. This was going to be a budget version. And I was thinking about, what should I do? Where should I go? And I came across a company that you can hire a bike from, and they give you the maps, they book your accommodation, they carry your luggage, but you do the bike ride by yourself. And I thought, that appeals to me. And so, as I was planning it, my best friend Kirsty said, can I come with you? And, yeah, of course, that'd be fun. So the 2 of us in 2014 flew into Prague. And we decided we would cycle from Prague to Vienna. And it was magnificent, just incredible. So we got given the bikes from a really, really nice man, and we got the maps, and we got all the instructions about how to get from Prague to Vienna. But he didn't speak any English. He only spoke Czech. We didn't speak any Czech. We only spoke English. So that was our starting point. Off we took. We realised we weren't very good map readers because we kept getting lost. And I think it could have had something to do with the really lovely local cheap wine that was on offer as well. That probably did add to it just a little bit. But it was amazing. And some of the scenery you saw, it was like riding in a fairy tale, like being in a storybook, and just town after town. And we met the most amazing people. And the food, oh my goodness, don't get me started on the food and wine in the Czech Republic. I just couldn't get enough of it. People have often asked me what the highlight of that journey was, and there were so many, just the scenery to start with. You just can't imagine how beautiful it is. But the highlight started out as a disaster. And my best friend Kirsty and I were 10 k's out from the little town that we just left, and we had another 60 odd k's to go to get to our next destination, and the chain on her bicycle snapped. And we could fix tyres and basic things, but we didn't have anything to repair a chain. So we tried ringing the phone line that we had as a 24-hour backup, and we had no reception. So we started toddling back into the little town. And as we started walking, we came across a young couple who were hiking. And she was German and spoke English. He was Czech and spoke German, and he rode a bike. So we had this really convoluted conversation around what was going on here, and then they started laughing and said, what would two foolish Australians decide to ride from Prague to Vienna anyway? And I said, because it's fun. So he tried to fix it and couldn't either. So all of us started walking back together to the little village, and we met another man, and he was a cyclist. And he said, look, I can't fix this either. Well, he didn't, because he didn't speak English, but he translated to us eventually that he couldn't fix it, and we were all so foolish. But he said he had a family that lived in the little town that we'd just come from. So, okay, cool. I ended up riding back with him to his family home, and my friend Kirsty continued walking with this couple. And we got back to the family home, and I met his parents, Charles and Margaret, and great English names, and they didn't speak English. I had the most amazing day. Margaret set me down with elderberry cordial, poppy seed cake, all these incredible foods. And that was another really interesting thing. I'd gone from someone with serious eating disorders when I was younger to someone who realised that food wasn't only yummy, but it was fuel for my adventures. So that was a fantastic little moment. So that day I spent with her, and her husband went and collected my best friend Kirsty and brought her back on her bike. And we sat there together and we had a chat, and we'd by this stage caught hold of our bicycle backup, and they said, we will come and get you. And then Charles and Margaret said, no, you can't get in the car with strangers. We went, but you were strangers this morning too. And that was a really lovely moment to realise we'd made friends with these people. So back to Australia, what am I going to do now? Just west of here, there's a fantastic cycle path, and it's called the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail. And it's 180 kilometres of off-road riding. And I decided to borrow a swag and go and camp for 5 days and explore the 180 kilometres that the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail has to offer on my own. And it was a little bit scary, but it wasn't so scary. It was, what I enjoyed about it most was the peace, the solitude, the sense of being alone. And for someone who used to crave company and always needed to be around people and do things with people, to enjoying the solitude of being on my own was a really big shift for me. I also realised how self-reliant you could be and how little you need to travel. That was my travelling gear. So that ride's over. That was me just being silly. I came back and started to get itchy feet again and thinking, where can I go? What can I do? Where next? Get the bicycle back out. And for a while, I'd had the map of Tasmania up on my wall and my fridge. And the idea was that I would now, because I drive, take my car and drive around Tasmania and do a few hikes, because I loved hiking in Tasmania. And then I got thinking, maybe a bike ride a couple of days would be fun. Then I gave myself a bit of a kick and went, no. If you're going to ride, you're going to ride around Tasmania. So I looked up some maps and different things and decided that that would be a good idea. So I booked my flights into Launceston, and I found a place to hire a bike. That was a whole other story. This gentleman's house, he'd owned a backpacker's place, and it was filled. You couldn't see the floor, you couldn't see anything for bikes and camping gear. And he pulled out this bicycle for me. Not the best bike I've ever seen, but that was going to be my transport for 10 to 12 days around Tasmania. So everything's booked, I'm planning to go, and lo and behold, about 4 or 5 weeks out of this, I have a teeny tiny mini little stroke at the airport. And so I'm raced off to hospital, and it's all going pear-shaped, and I'm not feeling real flash about this time. And I said to the doctor, but I've got a bike ride to do. And he said, oh, you'll be fine in a couple of days for a bike ride. And the friend of mine was with me said, no, she's talking 700 k's around Tasmania. So I had to go through a series of tests and all those kind of things, and it all came out clear, and I'm still here, and I'm fine. So that's another story. So I, as I said, flew into Launceston, miserable day. Good old Tasmania. Grey, dark. And I just went and got the bike, put my panniers, my bedroll, my tent, everything onto the bicycle, looked at it and thought, you're crazy, this is not possible, you can't do this. And I was terrified. Like, I can't begin to tell you how scared I was. And I had friends in Launceston, I was about to ring them and bail. And then I just said to myself, you've got a bike, it's 2 wheels, and it's just a single turn of that pedal. Get on it and ride. So I did. First day, I rode about 100 k's, set up camp, and I was so relieved to stop riding. But it had been a beautiful, sunny, magnificent day. And over the next 10 to 12 days, I explored the whole east coast of Tasmania on my push bike, all up, as I said, around about 700 kilometres. Some of it was amazing. Some of it was beautiful. I rode through mountains and rainforests. I rode old rail trails and some incredible places. You can't forget them when they've got names like Bust My Gall Hill and Break My Neck Hill. And man, I didn't want to think about it. But realistically, there was some walking that happened on this bike ride. If I said I rode 700 k's, I'd be lying. There was definitely some pushing bikes up hills. It wasn't all glorious. There were days of absolute misery. And there was one day in particular, it was just torrential rain. And I had about 100 k's to go this day. And there was a town, 80 k's in it, and then my destination. And I'm riding along, and it was literally just storming. And I thought, I wanted to ring someone, and then of course you couldn't get my phone out. Couldn't make a coffee because everything would be wet. And there was no shops, there was no houses, there was nothing. I finally got to the last little town, and I pulled in, and the lady there saw me at the pub, and I said, "Can I have a coffee?" And she said, "We don't make coffee." So she said, "Look, I'll go to the kitchen, I'll make you one." Got me a coffee, bought some chocolate and towels, put me in front of the fireplace and dried me off, and offered to drive me to the last 15, 20 k's to my destination. And I went, no thanks, I'm stubborn. I've got to complete this journey. This is my adventure. So I rode into the next little town, found the first pub. No tent went up that night, let me tell you. I found the first hotel and found a room with a bathtub and spent the night warming up and drying everything I owned. There were definitely some highlights though, the echidnas. Oh my goodness, everywhere you went there was echidnas. And why I mention that as a funny little moment is that when you're in a car, you miss things. And when you are walking, it's too slow. But when you're on a bike, you're part of the world around you. You're part of the environment. And I saw so many echidnas. And the first day, every time I saw one, I'd jump off my bike and race to take a photo. And I realised if I kept doing that, I'd never get to Hobart. So I had to stop doing that eventually. So if someone had said to me all those years ago when I first got back on my push bike that one day I would ride 700 k's around Tasmania, I would have laughed at them. I would have said, "You are crazy. That is simply not possible." However, at the age of 50, when I cycled on over the bridge and I saw the sign that said Hobart, I burst into tears. It was tears of joy, tears of relief, tears of agony. And my legs just stopped. And I had no one there to give me a hug. I had no one there to say, "Well done." There was no medal. It was just me and a whole bunch of tears and pain. And the hundreds of cars going across the big bridge, if you've seen it, over into Hobart, the people going past, seeing this woman standing beside her bike crying, had no idea that I had just completed my dream. And it was that moment when I thought to myself, you know what? I don't just think anything is possible. I actually know it is possible. So thank you for listening, and you might want to know where to next. I have no idea, but I do suggest you get on your bikes and give it a go. And yeah, who knows? Thank you for listening.